I really wanted to give this sort of sense of like invisibility to him.
If anything, my hope is that the audience will be left with a lot more questions than answers. That they'll be able to kind of really want to do a deep dive on their own.
A very intimate, genuine connection that I think both characters were longing for.
I can't do this, man. I'm scared.
This movie is dark and really basks in the uncomfortable. Even if there's any humor, it really stems from that uncomfortability. So, Brett, what kind of research did you end up doing in regards to Terry Nichols?
I read everything I could about him, old articles, books, not just about him, but about McVeigh and about the whole network of white supremacy that these people come from, which was basically came really into fruition post-Vietnam War. So it was really getting into that and really getting a sense of just how vast this network was and is. And so, and reading everything I could about the decisions he made, what he was like, and what his relationship to McVeigh was.
Was there any tick or like physical trait that you knew you needed to have in your performance for Terry?
In all the footage I saw of him and in the description of him, I really wanted to give this sort of sense of like invisibility to him, in that he had a lack of taking up space when he was there and needed McVeigh to sort of validate the fact that he was living it all. And so not only using McVeigh, but also just the whole organization that they were a part of. And so that like almost fueling his presence. And so that there was a real tightness, stillness, a Midwesternness, a very specific Midwesternness to him that I really wanted to convey.
Well, and Ashley, was the Cindy character based on someone in McVeigh's life?
Not that I know of. I think Mike brought her in there to just kind of show a different side of Timothy and to kind of show that he is a human being with feelings and, he's yearning for a connection with someone. And, it was really nice how those scenes played out because there's a lot of quietness and there's a lot of storytelling through me and Alfie's eyes looking at each other and just showing, that there is a softer side to him and her being completely unaware of what, his motives were throughout the film. It was interesting just how they played out and how it was, a very intimate, genuine connection that I think both characters were longing for.
When it has to be challenging as an actor to essentially have a meet cute with one of the most notorious domestic terrorists in U.S. history.
Yeah.
So did you really have to disconnect from the events that he'd eventually do to be able to really stay in that moment?
When I got this role, I did as much research as I could. I obviously was aware of it because I remember seeing it on the news when I was younger. And, I really wanted to just come in with no like intentions of trying to do something. Mike literally just let us kind of have our space. And I really went off of Alfie and he did such an incredible job as Tim and kind of getting things out of him and making him open up, in the film. It was nice. And Mike really did give us a space to just have our time and just find that connection. And we knew each other a couple years before this. So we already had a connection as friends before that. So then, I was just kind of letting Alfie lead the way.
Well, and Anthony, was Frederick based on the unidentified accomplice that McVeigh claimed but was never found? Or was that just an original character? What was...
He was based on a character but was kind of changed and somewhat removed. So I was able to actually get some research, watch interviews, but at the end of the day, you're really kind of building all of that in, and then showing up to set and really finding it in the room.
Well, and so did that mean that you're just focusing on the script, or is there some background that you were able to look into for the character?
Yeah, I was able to find out like some really interesting stuff. I mean, if anything, my hope is that the audience will be left with a lot more questions than answers. That they'll be able to kind of really want to do a deep dive on their own of what the circumstances were leading up to this horrific event, and but ultimately that that information was incredibly important, just in terms of me feeling solid as
when domestic terrorism is always a hot button issue. Brett, why do you think it's important that movies are made about these types of people?
Because this movie could have been set in present day. There are these conversations being had right now, and there are people like this who are amongst us, and we're living in an age of major extremism. This is a definite precursor to what we're having, and we're seeing this extremism on both sides, and there being this horseshoe effect. And so it's important for us to recognize that. And I'm hoping this film, in its small way, like Anthony is saying, makes people ask these questions, so that not to make anybody more paranoid, but to really be able to break down what's going on in order to avoid something like this happening again, and for us to sort of have more empathy towards human beings in general, to ask what is the type of isolation that adds to this type of rage that causes these things to happen.
Yeah, I was shocked at how much the film does feel modern, despite the fact that it obviously is historically based. And it's kind of scary how much the parallel between a lot of the stuff that Timothy's going through, that we see that currently. And I have to ask too, so Mike clearly had a very clear vision for this. Ashley, can you speak on Mike and how he is as a director?
Yeah, Mike is such a talented and amazing guy. He really put everything into making this film. And I think he was very clear about how he wanted it to be made. He was very clear with all the actors. He was so passionate about telling this story in the right way. Every day on set, he was so excited. He was there. He was so supportive. And he just really wanted to do the best job that he could with telling such a horrific story. But I think he's incredibly talented. He was such an amazing person to be able to work with. And again, I was, attached to this film 6 years before we started filming it. So I really got to know Mike very well, and he's become a very good friend of mine. And I just think he's incredible. And I think that everybody involved in this film did an amazing job. And I think it's an important story. If people don't know who Timothy McVeigh is, they will, and they'll be more aware of it. And for people who lived through it and had to see everything, it's a hard subject, but I think it's an important story.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And my last question, my editor will be so upset if I don't ask this. So Brett, final season of Stranger Things happens later this year. How many questions have you been bombarded with during this press tour so far?
You're the first one, actually.
Really? That's exciting. Are you excited to see the episodes finally unleashed upon the world?
Yeah. Very. Whenever that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever. Yeah. Hopefully this year.
Really, I have no idea. I really don't.
Yeah. I figured.
They don't trust me.
Sadie, I talked to Sadie recently, and she had a very similar response. So
yeah. No. I have somebody in the room with me right now who'll kill me if I say anything.
I can't do this, man. I'm scared.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.